children, Lucas is quite involved with therapies, both traditional and alternative. He gets physical therapy, speech and feeding therapy, as well as vision therapy through the state early intervention program, which has been absolutely wonderful here in Arizona.
Right.
He also gets a ton of alternative therapies, which we've learned about through various books on brain health and how to heal the brain. Mainly movement lesson, which also was a huge blessing that Michelle Turner, who is the owner of Movement Lesson, is only about a 45-minute drive from us here in Arizona. Movement therapy, or Movement Lesson, is basically neurological physical therapy. So they put Lucas in different positions to teach his body how to, or to teach his brain how to move his body.
Right.
He actually recently started aquatic movement lesson, which is super exciting, especially since we have access to pools for a long period of time here in Arizona. And he absolutely loves the water. He has so much fun. Water therapy really builds his core muscles, his abdomen muscles up, which, as you can imagine, are very important for holding him up and keeping him steady so that he can hold himself up. You know, aquatic therapy has been used for so many things, and especially, I think it's especially important for kids with CP or low muscle tone or anything like that, because they can have that independence in the water. They don't have gravity of the earth pushing on their body, so he's able to move on his own and kick his legs and have some independence of not being held and confined all the time, and he absolutely loves it.
So one of the next therapies that we started him on at a very young age, he started CBD, cannabidiol, which is hemp oil that is a cannabinoid that helps with anti-convulsion practices inside of the brain. So what we ended up doing at a very young age, I was trying to put him on CBD at about 3 months. We were dealing with seizure medications at the time, and what was going on is we were really looking for an alternative, because we felt like the seizure medication was doing what it does to a lot of kids, which is numb their personality and delay their growth and delay their development. So then what we ended up doing was I reached out to the community, whether that was dispensaries or whoever I thought was an expert at the time in the space. And what we ended up doing is having conversations about basically about cannabidiol, CBD, and figuring out how we could administer that to him at a really young age to make it effective. I found that not a lot of people had a lot of advice. So I went deep diving into the way that the body breaks down cannabinoids and also breaks down CBD. So what I figured out was that the liver had such a huge part of the bioavailability factor of cannabis and or cannabinoids. And so what I ended up doing was we ended up creating formulations that were increasing bioavailability, so increasing its effectiveness to work for him. And then we started doing dose structures on saying, okay, how much can I give him per day that would make it effective? So then as I moved further down that line and talked to many people and read research from Israel and research from all of the universities that's done really in-depth studies, we found out that usually because of a child's metabolism, so the metabolism in a baby is much faster than it is in an adult. So they produce, and what they do also is break down cannabinoids much faster than you might think. So then what we had to do was go to microdosing. So then I got into business with a gentleman who was doing biomarking, which also allows us to physically see that CBD is being active in the body. So then as I moved forward, I created a formulation for him as I was manufacturing product before he was even born, which was pretty interesting.
Another major blessing. God moved us to Arizona so Brandon could start a CBD manufacturing company, and then just happens that we have a child who would really benefit from it.
So I ended up having a lot of conversations with a lot of different people, really trying to get advice on really moving the entire. My biggest fear was when I administered it to him, I wasn't sure what to expect in a kid his age, and I didn't know how it was going to respond. I didn't know really what to do, and so as a parent of somebody, I understood this plant really well, but I never had to administer it to a baby before, right? That's a different story. And so what I ended up finding in my experience was that it was a lot more complicated, and I noticed that other kids were actually, and parents were dealing with the same thing. And so as I went through and did all the research on exactly how to administer and what the best options were, figuring out how to get such a small amount of liquid that contains his dose throughout the day. And so whenever I finally got down to the formulation, finally figured it all out, he received such good seizure control from it that we knew that we were on the right path here. And as I moved forward a couple months went by, and we noticed that things were a little different. So I would raise and lower his levels because the body automatically adapts to a specific dose. And so when you understand that the body gets used to that, and then it becomes less effective. So what I did was I would lower it sometimes and raise it, lower it, raise it, and basically the body adapts. And so at that point, what we were able to do is somewhat keep him in seizure control, along with some of his medication. And that was the other thing I had to do, was go through his medication list and say, okay, what would be interfering, right? So CBD can cause a reaction in medication, so especially in the liver. And so what I had to figure out was which medications worked well with CBD, which ones didn't, and then sort of adjust. And I worked with his neurologist on this as well. And we found that a perfect small dose of clobazam and a high dose of CBD allowed us to achieve seizure control.
Right, and CBD has brought so many benefits with it, not just seizure control, but pain and inflammation with teething. Like Brandon mentioned, it's allowed us to give him a much smaller dose of a pretty powerful anti-seizure medication.
Well, and then, to get back to what I was saying, I started working with other parents all over the world as well.
I remember specifically, we were having dinner one night, and he was telling me about someone who had reached out to his CBD company asking for CBD for their, I think the baby was 2 or 3 months old.
Right.
And I got so upset because we hadn't really come to a conclusion on Lucas yet, and I wanted him on CBD. I knew that it would be beneficial, and I guess when it's your own child, these other parents who ordered the bottle for their child, I guess they just had a little more courage at the time than we did. So we actually, our neurologist had Lucas get a 24-hour EEG with a camera monitor. And another God thing, in my opinion, we had an excellent epileptologist who came and explained Lucas's seizure activity to us and what types of seizures that he had. He also, even though it's not necessarily a part of Phoenix Children's Hospital's policies, he kind of slid in some advice on dosing and let us know at the time that we were not giving him enough and we did need to increase it.
Right.
And he was like right at 4 or 5 months old at that time. It was the summer after he was born. So that was major, and that's kind of when everything turned around, and he got on the clobazam, which is the anti-seizure medication. His neurologist advised that he would need to be on a lower dose because of the CBD, and we were off. He was seizure free for quite some time with that regimen.
And honestly, he's the only time that we deal with seizures now out of him really is when his glycine gets out of control, and
yes.
that
he
is
has a major weight gain,
right.
And his glycine medication has to be adjusted. Also, things like pain and heat, getting too hot.
Yeah,
All of
are,
those can be triggers, and we have found things like frankincense essential oil, for example. Brandon's mother found on a
there was a study that was done that was for aromatherapy.
aromatherapy for seizures.
For seizures.
She found it in the
It calms,
epilepsy Facebook group.
right, and it calms down the neurons in the
Yeah.
brain when you're
Frankincense
when you
is,
smell it.
yeah,
but-
frankincense is a it calms the neuro system.
Right.
Yeah. So we use that kind of as a rescue if we see Lucas going into a seizure or it looks like he's gonna kind of do something funky. We kind of just let him smell the bottle of frankincense, let him have that aromatherapy, and a lot of times it'll pull him out. And we believe that any seizure stopped is a brain cell saved. So it's very important to us, which is another reason why Lucas is watched after 24 hours a day, at least by one person, if not two.